UFC 281. We get Carla Esparza versus Zhang Weili. Carla Esparza, man, she is like, she has to be just incredibly understated. It's like on the one hand, I don't want to call her a legend, right? I feel like that's a big overstatement. I don't mean to do her a disservice. I don't mean to knock her at all, but it's kind of just the vibe that I initially get by saying that. But then when I start to actually list off some of the things that she's done, won the inaugural Invicta FC Championship. Went out there, first woman ever to win the UFC Championship. Now look, she didn't defend it, right? Ended up losing it to Joanna. And we all know the run that Joanna went on, right? We all know the way that she just stamped her flag in the ground in the division. It's easy to forget. Joanna wasn't the first one to do it. It was Carla Esparza who won that belt first. Now at that point, you sit back and you look at it and it's like, what we typically saw as the arc in MMA, you saw a lot of these like early, I'll go so far as to call them pioneers, but you saw a lot of these very early competitors. They saw success. They went out and they did their thing, right? And whoever it was that was the best at the time rose to the top. But as new blood started to enter, as people who started to study the sport, started to break it down, these weren't just people who were coming from like solo traditional martial arts backgrounds and then coming in and trying to apply that craft to MMA, but people who are actually studying MMA, people who were melding together multiple martial arts earlier on before they actually made it to the UFC. When that group hit, that first group faded away. You could see that they were outclassed. You could see that they weren't quite ready, right? And it makes a lot of sense, man. When you're early on in a sport, the sport evolves so quickly. Like we don't see that in the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball or anything like that because those sports are far more evolved. Those sports have been around for far longer. So the just incredible leaps and gains that you see in the beginning, that's history for those sports. But we saw it here, right? It's much more recent when we're talking about MMA and the UFC in particular. And Carla Esparza, she was out there putting her stamp on things early, man. But she didn't fade away. She didn't disappear. That's one of the things that makes her so awesome, right? That's one of the things that really, truly makes her stand out. Is that all these years later, Carla Esparza puts together this run. Man, look, there was a point in time where she racked up some losses, right? Got some back-to-back losses after getting stopped by Tatiana Suarez. Dude, she went out there and she made a change, okay? It takes a lot. At that point in your career, the success that you had already seen to just make that commitment, to make that admission to yourself, to your team, got to make a change, got to do things differently. I'm not seeing the success that I need to, and I think that I can make my way back. Like, do you think the UFC was a believer in her at that point? Do you think the UFC, if you would have sat down and you'd have asked some people at the very top, Dana White included, hey, Carla Esparza is going to be a future champion? Dude, I don't think anybody thought that. Other than her and her most hardcore fan group, right? Her and her head coach, those type of people. But she put together that run. She racked up all them wins. And then all of a sudden we see her in the rematch with Rose. And I'll be the first to admit, I thought she was going to lose that fight. I didn't give her much of a chance. Thought Rose Namajunas was going to come out there and continue to do what Rose Namajunas does. In a weird sort of way, I actually didn't give Rose that rematch with Zhang Weili. I thought Weili won that one, but the judges saw it a little bit differently. So then we end up seeing the rematch with Rose and Carla in what had to be one of the most uneventful, boring fights. Just unsatisfying. Can't get the time back. Had to watch it for historical purposes and stuff, but man, just right. Now let me ask you this as a quick little sidebar. Did you dislike the fight more? Which fight did you dislike more? We're talking about the rematch between Rose and Carla Esparza or Adesanya versus Romero. Like, think about that for a second, right? Both of those fights had a lot of people very disappointed. Nevertheless, so I didn't think Rose won that fight with Zhang Weili, but then she comes in, she goes with Esparza, incredibly uneventful fight. Carla Esparza snatches up the belt. Dude, so now she's a 2-time holder of the belt. Those are incredible stats. And to do it early on and then to do it so much later, not only when she was so much older, but also against this new crop of talent. I know Rose wasn't, right? But Rose was actually there in the first fight. But the crop of talent that she had to make it through on the way to get to that fight once again, just awesome stuff. And then she gets thrown in for her first title defense against an absolute killer, man. Against just a ferocious competitor, man. She's something else. Look, and I know you probably think like I'm just heaping too much praise on Zhang Weili. I'm a believer. I really think that she's the best in the division. I think she already should have had the belt, right? She ends up getting that first loss against Rose. Completely legitimate, but let's be honest with each other. Somewhat of a lucky shot, right? And I don't mean to discredit what Rose did, but it's like, how many times does she throw a kick out there like that and it doesn't get the knockout type result? So in that sense, it was lucky because everything just happened to line up. It landed perfectly. Normally, that's just a kick that would have landed, maybe caused a little bit of damage, this and that. But, that's the way the game goes. But my point is she didn't go out there and get outclassed over the course of 5 rounds. So she had snatched up the belt, right? Looked incredibly impressive in what we saw again with her against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I felt like she won the rematch against Rose. I mean, think about what she did against when she initially snatched up the belt. Dude, against Jessica Andrade, goes out there and smokes her with the knees. Zhang Weili, she's the, I'll say the future of the division. I also think she's the present. After Saturday night, I predict her to win this one, but I think she's going to be the future. Now, look, she's older. You say, hey, she's 35 years old. She's up there in age, particularly when it comes to the lighter weights, right? You're absolutely right. She is. But the other thing that you have to keep in mind, she didn't start fighting until she was 25. And a great boxing trainer, Teddy Atlas, has a saying. And one of the things that he always said was, a fighter's age is not measured by his birth certificate. It's measured by the amount of punishment he's taken. So you could be an old 28. You could be a young 35. She's a young 35. And she also still has all of her athleticism, man. She's peaking. She's so fast on her feet. Hands are so good, so explosive, incredibly strong. Like, dude, physically, right? Just as an athletic specimen, she's top of the food chain. When you listen to a guy like Eric Alberson, right, the guy who's the head coach, he's coached the Pitbull brothers. I think he's probably most famous for the work that he's done with Henry Cejudo. Host of other MMA and wrestling high level competitors. He's come out and said that she's the best athlete he's ever worked with. The best, man, bar none, hands down. Zhang Weili is number 1. That's an incredible statement. Now, maybe it's true and maybe it's not. Maybe he's saying a little bit for the hype. Maybe he's not. But he can't completely make it up, right? He can't just completely pull that out of thin air and say that she's a great athlete, but every time we watch her on TV, she's anything but. We know how awesome she is. We know about that athleticism, but we know that it's not just the athleticism. We know that it's translated into the fighting skill. Now, on the one hand, you can look and say, she's not great at controlling the gap. And I would say, yeah, but she's so good at closing the distance. She's so explosive. She can not only lead, but she can counter. She's got this great footwork from the outside where she can bounce around and then she can blitz in on you. She can put together these combinations. In the clinch, she's powerful. Man, she's been working on her wrestling, working with internationally high level talent, finding the best coaches that she can possibly get. Look, technique for technique, if you put both of these women up against each other, I would say that Carla Esparza is the better wrestler. This isn't about technique versus technique. This is about each person going out there and trying to do it to the other person. And I think that Weili's technique is high enough that between her age, her strength, her athleticism, her explosiveness, that everything else, that she'll be able to overcome the technique edge that Carla Esparza has. I don't think this is going to be a situation where Carla goes out there and she's able to take her down and hold her, at 3.5, 4 minutes left in the round and hold her down. Get in little bits of ground and pound, position over submission type thing, and just keep her down, stay heavy on her, keep her hips over, and just beat her up. It's not going to happen. Not with Zhang Weili. No. First of all, this starts on the feet. Zhang Weili, in my opinion, has a huge advantage there. I think Carla's kind of slow, man. I think, she obviously came to the striking game late. We've seen her improve a lot over the course of her career. I just don't think she's at Weili's level. I think her hands are slower. Her feet are slower. I don't think her footwork's great. I think she's going to find herself in some bad positions. Doesn't really hold her hands great. I mean, look at what Weili has done to Rose. Look at what Weili did to Joanna. Look at what we've seen what she's done in these fights. I think her striking's on another level. Look at those leg kicks that she throws. Now, that doesn't mean that Carla's not going to get a takedown, man. She is. Right? I think unless this fight were to end early by some knockout stoppage, Carla will get a takedown. She's not going to see much success. And she's going to have to go do a lot of takedowns. I bet you she ends up going like 3 for 8, 2 for 8 or something crazy. I bet you Zhang Weili shows the best defensive wrestling she's ever shown. And I bet you that when she gets taken back down, she doesn't take a lot of punishment and she finds a way to get back up. I would be surprised if this one went 5. I think Zhang Weili comes out victorious no matter how it goes, no matter whether this is a decision, whether you tell me it ends up being close, whether you tell me it ends early. I think Zhang Weili's got the clear path to victory. The only way I see Carla Esparza winning is through wrestling. And I don't think that she can out-wrestle her over 5 rounds, and I don't think that she can get a stoppage. So look, I see Zhang Weili coming out with the victory on this one. The line has moved in her favor. Started out at, I want to say, around 3-1, 3.5-1, right? Minus 300, minus 350. And it's jumped all the way up to minus 400 now, depending on where you're getting it. So honestly, I still think there's value in that line. That's how sure I am of the victory. I think there's value in the line going with Zhang Weili. So let me know what you guys think. Am I underestimating what Carla Esparza brings? Am I overestimating what Zhang Weili brings to the table? Do you guys think this is going to be an awesome fight and early go to decision? Let me know.